A lot of people listening to this have plans, calendars full of tasks, goals written on whiteboards or phone screens, yet there is a quiet tension under all of it. A feeling that one unexpected problem could knock everything sideways. You may look organized on the outside, but inside your body never fully relaxes, because it is always bracing for the next hit. There is the guy in his mid-30s who did everything right on paper but still checks his work messages late at night because he knows how fast stability can disappear. There is the woman who fills notebooks with positive thoughts but still wakes up with a tight chest because her life never slowed down. There is the man who shares every gym session and every promise to get fit, yet the mirror keeps showing the same reflection. Because announcing change is not the same as earning it. This is the quiet exhaustion behind modern ambition. You stay busy, you stay hopeful, but you never feel grounded. Here is the truth most people avoid. If what you were chasing was really making you stronger, you would feel more solid, not more afraid. Because real strength brings calm, not constant tension. Goals pull your attention toward tomorrow, but life keeps demanding something from you today. And when those two clash, hope turns into anxiety. You are not broken. You are just tying your worth to things you cannot fully command, which is why safety always feels out of reach. What comes next will show you why this pattern repeats and how to step out of it. And before we move on, type one word in the comments that fits what you just felt. Something like drained, trapped, or empty, because once you can label it, you stop being owned by it. What you felt in the last section, that constant sense of instability even while chasing goals, comes from being trained to live in tomorrow instead of building something solid today. And this is exactly the kind of trap Machiavelli saw centuries ago. He was not a thinker who dealt in ideals or comfort. He was a strategist who lived through betrayal, collapse, and political violence, which forced him to understand how power actually moves in the real world. He never told people to stay positive. He showed them how to survive when everything around them is uncertain and how to come out on top when conditions turn hostile. To him, life was not a fair game. It was a shifting arena of interests, pressure, and hidden agendas. And anyone who depended on hope instead of positioning was already losing. That is why his perspective still cuts so deep, because it does not soothe you, it equips you. This video is not about painting a prettier future for you to dream about. It is about giving you the stability to stop being thrown off balance by every obstacle that appears. You are not here to learn how to crave more. You are here to learn how to stand with less, because needing less is what makes you harder to control. You will start seeing how to separate your self-worth from outcomes you do not command. So when plans fall apart, you do not collapse with them. You simply adapt. That ability to stay steady under pressure is what real strength looks like. It does not depend on applause, timing, or luck. Look at two people who both get laid off. One spirals into fear and shame. The other becomes alert and ready to pivot. The situation is identical, but the internal framework is not. Machiavelli teaches you how to build that framework so your life is no longer owned by what might happen next. And in the next part, you will see why the thing you thought was protecting you, your goals, has actually been quietly draining your power. After understanding how Machiavelli viewed power, it becomes easier to see why goals so often betray the people who rely on them. Because instead of making you stronger, they quietly teach you to wait. The moment you attach your identity to something that has not happened yet, you place your life on pause. And a paused life always feels incomplete, no matter how ambitious the future looks. When you tell yourself that confidence will arrive after a promotion, that love will finally make you feel whole, or that money will buy you peace, are training your nervous system to believe that the present version of you is not enough. That belief never rests. It hums in the background like static, turning every day into something you must endure rather than inhabit. The man chasing a promotion does not simply perform his job. He watches every interaction, every email, every meeting for signs of approval or rejection. Because one decision outside his control has been given the power to define his worth. The woman hoping for a relationship does not just connect with people. She carries a quiet ache into every conversation, scanning for signs that she is chosen, because being wanted has become her evidence that she matters. The person chasing money no longer sees income as a tool. Every slow month feels like danger. Every expense feels like a mistake, because financial success has become a stand-in for self-respect. In all of these lives, the goal is not a guide, it is a void. And the human mind cannot stand a void, so it fills it with worry, comparison, and constant self-evaluation. This is why the most driven people are often the most anxious, because they live emotionally in a future that does not exist yet, while the present never feels good enough to stand on. When your value is located in tomorrow, today becomes something to escape, not something to build from. And that is what makes goals so psychologically unstable. A delayed result stops being information and starts feeling like a verdict on who you are. A missed target does not just mean try again. It means maybe you are not enough. And that kind of pressure slowly erodes your sense of self. Machiavelli saw this clearly. Power does not come from waiting to be validated by fate. It comes from strengthening what you can control right now. When you build your identity around outcomes, you hand your emotional balance to forces that do not answer to you, which is why even small disruptions can feel catastrophic. But when you begin to loosen that grip, something subtle shifts. You still have ambition, but it no longer owns you. You still pursue growth, but you no longer depend on results to feel steady. That inner stability changes how you move through the world. You negotiate with less fear. You connect without desperation. And you work with focus instead of panic. This is the beginning of a different relationship with yourself. One where you stop asking the future to make you whole and start building solidity in the present. And once you see how goals have been feeding emotional hunger rather than resolving it, you become ready for the next realization. That many of the things you thought were plans were really just psychological anesthesia, numbing discomfort without ever healing the cause. Mason, what you just uncovered about goals feeding emotional hunger leads to a truth most people avoid because it is uncomfortable. They do not chase goals because they feel strong. They chase them because something inside them hurts. When work makes you feel small, instead of repositioning yourself or building a way out, you soothe that pain with the idea that one day you will finally leave and everything will be different. When you feel uneasy in your own body, instead of confronting the habits that shaped it, you cling to a future number on the scale and imagine the relief it might bring. When your life feels empty, instead of sitting with that emptiness and changing something real, you create a picture of a better version of yourself who will arrive later and fix everything for you. In those moments, the goal becomes a sedative rather than a strategy, because it numbs discomfort without ever touching the source. Writing it down, repeating it, or visualizing it gives you a short burst of control, but it fades quickly because nothing underneath has moved. Your job still drains you, your body still reflects the same patterns, and your days still feel heavy, even though your mind keeps escaping into tomorrow. That is why goals are so seductive. They allow you to feel hopeful without forcing you to be brave. They offer emotional relief without requiring confrontation. The philosophy behind this is simple and unforgiving. A goal does not close a wound. It just covers it long enough for you to pretend it is not bleeding. Look around, and you will see this pattern everywhere. The person who talks non-stop about quitting but never builds a new skill. The one who plans a physical transformation. While eating the same way every night, the future becomes a story they tell themselves so they do not have to face the present. Machiavelli would not have called this evil. He would have called it weakness. Because weakness is what happens when fantasy replaces action. Real power begins the moment you stop asking the future to save you and start dealing with what is actually hurting right now. Stay with this, because the next part will show you how this quiet self-deception has been shaping your decisions for years. And before we go there, write one word in the comments that names what you have been avoiding. Maybe work, maybe health, maybe life. Because once you name the thing, it stops hiding in the shadows and starts losing its hold over you. This is not about shaming yourself for wanting more. It is about recognizing that dreaming has become a way to avoid the hard, awkward, and sometimes painful work of changing what is actually in front of you. Because facing the present requires courage, while fantasizing about the future only requires imagination. When you finally turn toward what you have been running from, whether it is a stagnant job, a neglected body, or a hollow routine, you reclaim a piece of your authority. And that authority is what slowly dissolves the hunger that goals never could, replacing it with grounded, actionable clarity that grows stronger every day. Let this be the moment you choose action over anesthesia and presence over promises that never quite arrive again. The reason speaking your goals feels so satisfying is because your brain cannot tell the difference between a story and a result. So the moment you describe what you plan to do, a small chemical reward fires as if the achievement already exists. And that false sense of completion quietly steals the urgency that real progress requires. This is why so many people announce a new chapter before anything has actually changed. A man posts that he is starting a business, receives praise and encouragement, and then never launches anything because his nervous system already tasted success. A woman tells everyone she is finally serious about the gym, buys new clothes, shares workout pictures, yet months later, nothing is different, because she spent her emotional energy on being seen instead of being transformed. Words feel powerful, but they create the illusion of power, and that illusion weakens you, because you trade the discipline of action for the comfort of validation. The moment people clap, part of you relaxes, and relaxed people rarely change. At the same time, when you make your intentions public, you introduce unnecessary resistance. People start comparing, judging, doubting, or quietly hoping you fall. Not because they are cruel, but because your movement highlights their stagnation. Now, instead of just focusing on the work, you are carrying the weight of other people's expectations. And that invisible pressure drains your attention. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago, because in any competitive environment, revealing your intentions hands leverage to the world, while discretion keeps you protected. Silence builds gravity. It lets you move without interference, while noise turns your direction into a target. There is also a more subtle cost. Every time you explain what you are doing, part of your mind performs for approval, while the other part tries to create, and divided energy never produces force. Compare the person who constantly updates friends about a new project with the one who disappears and comes back with results. The second always commands more respect, not because they are better, but because their power was never diluted. This connects directly to how goals become emotional escape. Because talking about them gives relief without progress, and that relief keeps you frozen. The rule is simple and unforgiving. Silence gives weight to action. Speech makes it lighter, and the more you describe who you want to be, the less pressure you feel to actually become it. This addendum exists to deepen the idea without changing its direction. Because the habit of speaking instead of building does more than slow you. It trains your nervous system to seek applause instead of progress. When you learn to stay quiet about your intentions, you feel a strange discomfort because the ego wants to be seen. Yet that discomfort is where discipline grows. Silence creates a vacuum that only action can fill. So you are forced to work instead of perform. Over time, this changes how you see yourself. Not as someone who promises, but as someone who delivers. That identity shift is subtle but powerful, because people begin to trust you without you explaining anything. Even your own mind starts to believe you are capable, because it has evidence instead of stories. This is why Machiavellian thinkers valued restraint, not as secrecy for its own sake, but as a way to concentrate force. When energy is not scattered into words, it becomes pressure behind results. That pressure is what moves markets, shifts power, and changes lives. If you want to feel different, stop narrating your future and let your actions speak instead, because only outcomes create gravity. And gravity is what pulls opportunity toward you without you begging for it. Let this discipline become your new advantage starting today. The weakness of living through goals reveals itself the moment life stops cooperating. Because reality does not pause for your plans. It moves according to forces Machiavelli called fortuna. A wild current that no calendar, no vision board, and no amount of positive thinking can control. You can prepare for a career, a relationship, or a future for years. And one unexpected shift can erase all of it. Not because you were careless, but because the terrain changed beneath your feet. Markets collapse, industries vanish, people leave. And when your sense of self is built on a single outcome, that change feels like the end of who you are. This is why some people break when things go wrong, while others become sharper. The difference is not luck. It is what they tied themselves to. Picture two men who both lose their jobs on the same day. One goes home and stares at the ceiling, replaying every decision, feeling like his identity just got ripped away. The other feels the same shock. But instead of freezing, he starts calling contacts, researching new fields, and upgrading his skills. And months later, he is in a better position than before. They experience the same event. But one was married to a future that no longer existed, while the other was loyal to a system that could move. Fortuna does not punish effort. It punishes rigidity, because chaos is not cruel. It is simply change without permission. When you depend on a fixed plan, that change feels like betrayal. But when you depend on leverage and adaptability, it feels like a door opening somewhere else. This is why Machiavelli saw uncertainty as something to be mastered, not avoided. Because real power is not predicting what will happen. It is being ready no matter what happens. Fragile people cling to stability because it makes them feel safe. But resilient people build their stability inside themselves so the outside world cannot knock them over. That inner center is what allows you to keep moving when everything shifts. This connects directly to what you learned about conserving power. Because when you stop wasting energy on talking, fantasizing, and defending old plans, you have more capacity to respond when the ground moves. You no longer mourn the old map, you start reading the new terrain. And that single habit is what separates those who get crushed by change from those who turn it into fuel. And once you see this, you stop asking why the world is unfair, and start asking how you can move inside it. Because complaining never alters fortuna, but positioning always does. And that is the quiet edge that lets some people rise while others stay stuck, waiting for stability that never returns. The reason everything you have just learned about chaos and flexibility actually matters is simple. It is useless if you cannot control the one thing that should always obey you, yourself. Most people do not fail because they lack knowledge. They fail because they never develop authority over their own behavior. Society teaches you to be gentle with every weakness, to treat every slip as harmless, and to forgive yourself endlessly. But that comfort slowly trains you to stay the same. Someone who keeps pressing the snooze button, promising they will change later, is not tired. They are undisciplined. Someone who says they will start saving, training, or building something meaningful, then breaks that promise and explains it away, is not unlucky. They are ungoverned. When you repeatedly ignore your own word, your mind learns that your commands are optional. And once that happens, nothing in your life carries weight. This is where power begins and ends. With whether you take yourself seriously, Machiavelli understood this deeply. A ruler who cannot control his own house will never rule a city. And your mind is your kingdom. You do not become formidable by indulging every impulse. You become formidable by creating rules and enforcing them. A person who cannot refuse comfort cannot refuse exploitation. And someone who cannot keep promises to themselves will struggle to command respect from anyone else. Discipline is not cruelty, it is insurance. It protects your future from the moods of the present. When you begin to feel uneasy about the parts of you that procrastinate, settle, and avoid discomfort, you stop bargaining with them and start leading them. That shift is where real confidence comes from, not from positive thinking, but from knowing you will do what you said you would do. The principle is harsh but true. If you do not fear your own weakness, you will always fear the world, because you know you are unreliable. But when you become your own highest standard, outside pressure loses its power, because you already live under stricter laws. If this struck something inside you, comment "ready," not for anyone else, but to mark the moment you decided to stop negotiating with yourself. That word is a psychological boundary between who you were and who you are becoming. And this sets up what comes next. Because once your inner world has order, you finally have the foundation to build something that lasts. The next part will show you the 3 pillars that replace fragile goals with real power. Wow. Everything you have seen up to this point points to one unavoidable conclusion. Goals fail because they are built on hope. And hope breaks the moment reality changes. What replaces goals is not more motivation or stronger willpower. It is a structure built on 3 forces that continue to hold when circumstances shift: position, leverage, and adaptability. Position is not about what you want. It is about where you place yourself, because every economy has currents where money, attention, and power naturally flow. And if you are not inside those currents, effort alone will not carry you forward. Someone working in a shrinking industry can grind for years and still fall behind, while someone who steps into a growing market can rise quickly with the same level of work simply because of where they chose to stand. Leverage determines how much impact your actions have, because time is limited. And those who understand power look for ways to multiply their reach through systems, technology, and networks. A freelancer trading hours for money moves slowly, but someone who builds a product, a platform, or a team creates momentum that continues even when they are not present. Adaptability keeps the first 2 pillars alive, because no industry stays friendly and no environment remains stable. So the ability to sense change, read patterns, and adjust direction before you get trapped is what separates those who last from those who disappear. This is why Machiavellian power is never rigid. It stays alert and flexible, always ready to move when conditions shift. When you begin to operate this way, you stop asking what you want to achieve and start asking where you are positioned in the flow of money, influence, and information right now, and what you can do to strengthen that position. Someone who stays close to decision makers, understands emerging trends, and builds skills that travel can survive almost any storm, because their value is not locked into a single outcome. This approach removes desperation, because you are no longer gambling everything on one future. You are stacking the odds in your favor every day. Position puts you in the game, leverage expands your reach, and adaptability keeps you moving when things change. Together they create a system where progress feels natural instead of forced. Because instead of fighting reality, you move with it. And that perspective is what prepares you for the final shift in how you see yourself. Chase. The change that takes place after understanding all of this is not something you announce. It is something that anchors itself inside you. Because you stop living like someone who is waiting for permission to begin. A life built on goals keeps you measuring today against a future version of yourself. And that comparison quietly drains your sense of power, no matter how big your ambitions sound. A system shifts your focus in a different direction. Instead of asking when things will finally work out, you start asking where you stand and what you can influence right now. And that moves you out of imagination and into command. People who chase dreams spend their time narrating what will happen, picturing how it will feel, and judging themselves by whether the story comes true. People who operate with structure stay focused on what is unfolding. They adjust, they position, and they increase their leverage in real time. That difference shows in how they carry themselves. Someone with a system does not walk into a room looking for approval. They look like they already belong because they have options. When you have options, applause loses its importance and reassurance becomes unnecessary. The truth is simple. You do not need a flawless future to feel worthy. You need control in the present. Because control is what gives you the ability to choose, to leave, to negotiate, and to protect what matters. When you stop attaching your identity to outcomes and start anchoring it in structure, your nervous system relaxes, not because life becomes easy, but because you become steady. The person who once depended on goals for hope now depends on a system for stability. And that stability becomes who they are. You no longer wake up asking who you want to be. You wake up asking how to strengthen your position today. And that single shift changes everything. This was never designed to entertain you. It was meant to strip away the fog. Because once you recognize how much of your life has been spent waiting, you cannot go back to pretending. Most people will return to chasing timelines and calling that movement. But the ones who saw what was really said will feel a subtle shift, like something steadier replaced the noise. That steadiness is what control actually feels like. Not adrenaline, not motivation, but quiet command over your direction. When you know how to move, you stop needing the world to reassure you. That is the line between hoping and deciding. If this message reached you, you will feel it in the silence of your mind, not in excitement. Type system to seal that moment for yourself. And subscribe if you are ready to build a life driven by structure instead of fantasy. Because what comes next is not about dreaming more. It is about becoming someone who no longer needs to.